physical therapy at its truest form is fantastic. It's great for rehabbing, but like the biggest limitation that I've seen in it is like chronic pain. In physical therapy, the goal is to get you from your starting point and then get you back to where you were before you got injured and say, okay, you're discharged now.
Discharge doesn't mean optimal or ideal.
Is when I left physical therapy, I was realizing that I really wanted to be the bridge between physical therapy and optimal performance. You know, I want to build somebody the best possible body, like joint by joint, so that when they go and they practice their skill, they have the best joints to be able to use when they're going to practice their skill.
For those that don't know why you would know, I'm not sure, but Bryan doesn't have an ACL in his left knee.
Well, to be fair to everybody else, I also didn't know this. Everybody has a choice on how they want to face life. And far too often people get stuck into this victim mindset where like everything's against them. People are at a place and they're like, can I even change? Like, can this even get any better? And I'm like, well.
Welcome to the Higher Form Podcast, where high performance meets real life. We talk about how to grow with intention, lead with clarity, and feel strong in every season. Welcome back to the Higher Form Podcast. My name is Nick, and today I'm here with another Kansas City native, a father, and a mobility specialist. We have Mr. Bryan Ayars on the show today. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. I'm excited. You and I could talk for probably 6 hours, but we'll keep this to a normal episode.
Yes.
Well, cool. I think the easiest way to kick things off is just sharing a little bit about where you come from, you know, how you ended up in that seat here, and we'll just flow with the process from there, man. So you're from the Kansas City area. I know you grew up in Johnson County.
Yep. So I grew up in Shawnee, North Johnson County. So tucked away in the woods up there by like Lake Quivira. And I guess my journey really started there, where I started playing sports all through my neighborhood. You know, I had like that crew in the neighborhood that was like, 15 kids deep with people all over, always playing sports. And so I just got put down this trajectory of athleticism and athletics that I tried to follow through basketball, soccer, all the way up until high school. And then when I got to high school, I was one of those kids that like didn't grow. I was like stuck at 5 foot tall, like scrawny.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I had a hard time keeping up with the athletic demands of high school athletics. So I got through my freshman year playing basketball and soccer. And then I had one of my closest buddies from a long time, and he was just in my ear like, yo, you should do cross country, like, come run track, And so I went and ran track the end of my freshman year. And that kind of sent me down an endurance pathway, because I started running cross country and track every year and got away from the athletics side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for like 3 years, and then I got back into athletics when I went to KU and started playing like ultimate frisbee. And when I did that for a year, and then the summer after, I busted my knee.
Okay.
And some of that I chalk up to running cross country and running like a shit ton of miles.
Yeah.
And probably terrible form. You know what I mean? Always like full gas, getting run into the wall, running all these miles. And so I got injured when I tried to go back and play sports at a high level. And that really cascaded into a bunch of injuries and ultimately led me down a path of getting into taking care of myself, my body, and my problem-solving brain was like, how do I keep doing this, and how do I make this into a living, and how can I help other people do this? So
fast forward to 2015 or 16 when we met.
Yeah.
Just more context. I probably should have started with this, but Bryan is the client success manager here at Avexia Health and Performance, where we host the Higher Form Podcast. Bryan and I go back probably about a decade almost now.
Yeah, it'll be a decade in November, because that's when I got hired.
Okay. Yeah.
At
Lifetime. Yep. Yeah. So our roots go way back. And then even, I think I joke around about this, I'd known you longer than I've known my wife. I think I met you guys, both came into my life around the same time. Funny, I remember your interview when you were at Lifetime, being in our practical interview, part of the process. we did there was having coaches go through and lead us through. And I'll never forget the muscle smashing analogy used for foam rolling. It's something that will forever be my first memory of Bryan. And I do remember you being really passionate and educated and ready to dive into how to help people move better from early days, long before you went through all the education you have now, got all the
Hmm.
experience you have now. It's been cool because I've seen a much different version of you, a much younger, pre-fatherhood version, like all of it, man. I've had a
Yeah.
chance to be a part of, kind of on the sidelines of seeing you grow and develop.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing that you mentioned. Knowing me before you knew your wife, and I've known you since before I had a child. And from a professional standpoint, that sounds crazy to me because my career has gone in a few different directions
Mm-hmm.
since then and has circled back to here. But actually, only was at Lifetime for a year, not even a year before I actually had my son.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just wild to me when I think back to that timeline. But something that you mentioned about like muscle smashing and stuff like that, this was something I actually dawned on me yesterday, and I wanted to ask you because you talk about the education that I had and stuff like this, but the first thing that got me into personal training and like taking care of myself
Mm-hmm.
outside of going through physical therapy for my own body was the Becoming a Supple Leopard book, which is
Yes.
where that analogy came from, like
Yeah.
muscle smashing.
Kelly Starrett.
Yeah, Kelly Starrett.
Yeah.
And when I was taking one of our clients through that couch stretch yesterday, before you came in and said hi to us, it dawned on me that that's one of those stretches or like one of those exercises that sticks in my mind as something that truly did change my life in a
Mm-hmm.
strange way. And there was that, a lacrosse ball smash in the back of the hips,
Yep.
and then a few other things, but they just stick out in my mind as like the kind of the moments when I started to understand the body and started to dive into that. And I was curious to ask you, what are some of the like exercises or something that stand out to you as
Yeah.
being like life-changing moments in your early days of like, oh, that's how my body's supposed to work, or
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is something like that. Because for me, it was lacrosse ball smash in the back of my glutes and couch stretch. I remember in like 2014 or something, I was living in a house in Lawrence, and I had come across this book, Becoming a Supple Leopard, and I was reading through it, and I was like, okay, I'll try this. Put my knee up against the wall, full like pure couch stretch against the wall, and about ripped my quad off
Yeah.
because I was like, oh my god. And then breathe through it and work through it, and eventually it actually changed. And I think back to that when I'm working with clients now because people are at a place and they're like, can I even change? Like, can
Mm-hmm.
this even get any better? And I'm like, well, yes, and of course age has something to do with it, but I was in rough shape back when I first started getting into
I
this.
think most coaches are, at least on the corrective side, when you get into or get out of playing sports and doing things for purely performance focus.
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of the body care stuff is second nature, or not second nature, secondary,
Yeah.
not second nature.
Yeah.
It should be second nature. It should be priority
Yes.
because you can't perform if you're hurt. And you know my story. I struggled with a ton of injuries.
Hmm.
So when I left college, it was an underwhelming experience being a hurt participant most of the time, or at least a lot more of the
Yeah.
time than I wanted to be. When I got out, I remember there was a manager that gave me a client, one of my first really impactful mentors in the industry, gave me a client and said, hey, I told him you were an expert in helping people with spine issues. And I had my NASM CES at the time, and that was it. And I just passed the test because it was a requirement to be able to be on staff there. You had to have an NASM cert. I got my CPT after I got my CES. And so I remember something as simple as segmenting your spine down from a glute bridge was a big deal for me.
Oh yeah.
And understanding that the other ones that were big were a lot of these things that help with your lower cross syndrome,
Yeah.
the tight hip flexors, the weak hamstrings and glutes, the tight lower back, the
Yeah.
weak lower abdomen, the things that you hear in the standard CES books and frameworks.
Yeah.
And so that was a big one for me, was just learning what quad dominance meant and understanding why I developed that as an athlete. And then also look back at how do I quote unquote correct the issues that I've had. So like you, I probably got into a deep quad stretch and realized how stiff I was. Then I start to learn maybe that's why I had a patellar tendon injury. Maybe that's why I tore my bone off of my tibia. Maybe that's why I had these issues, because I didn't have it. And like you, all of a sudden these light bulbs start going off, thinking, shit, maybe this is all connected. And the
Yeah.
further I get into it, the more I was like, damn, it is 100% connected. And I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things where every athlete, they just perform, and there's a joke that the best athletes, like professionals, or really in the college realm, I would say, are the people that endure the most. They're the most resilient. Like they can go through the most ass kickings, the most brutal training that doesn't really make a bunch of sense. It's just like, hey, you need to get fit and you need to be fast and you need to
How
lift a
much can
lot of
you handle?
weights.
And if you can survive, you're going to be a beast. That was
Yeah.
100% how most of our college strength and conditioning programs were, is it was survival of the fittest.
Yeah, and if you look back to like some of the athletes that don't make it through that, and oftentimes they're some of the most skilled
Mm-hmm.
athletes, but they're not the most physically resilient,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't really get a chance. And like I think about, in your situation, that's probably a big part of it, where it's like you might not have had the physical resilience to get through all that shitty training, but I mean, you obviously had the skill to get to that level. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, I could keep up, but I couldn't get ahead because I was never the guy that was a freak in all of the physical stats.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that, you look at almost two sides of the equation, and you had to have both to perform at a super high level. You had to
Yeah.
be physically very gifted, and then you had to be very skilled at the game. You had to understand it and how to perform it at a high level. And then when you marry the two together, those are the guys or gals that make it to the next level or continue to excel at the highest levels. And if you can't make up or meet the standard in all of one, you had to make up for it in the other one. And if you
Yeah.
couldn't make up for it in the other one, or you got hurt, or you weren't resilient,
Hmm.
like you said, you just kind of ended up shit out of luck.
Yeah, for
But it is what it
sure.
is, and
Yeah.
I think that gives us a chance to come back around to your journey and talk about what really got you into mobility work. So, just backtracking again, Bryan and I can talk, like I said, forever, and we'll end up reeling it back in line a
Yeah.
couple of times. But pulling back to this transition in your journey where you started as a field athlete, you were doing all the really skilled, athletic, hand-eye focused sports. You got into endurance based off of just a limitation in your natural growth patterns, and then all of a sudden you start to try to get back on the other side, but you recognize that all of that volume of running and other things had taken its toll on your body and ultimately led you down a path where you got hurt, which is similar to my story,
Hmm.
and then started asking questions
Yeah.
and seeking out knowledge. And I feel like that's a really good base of understanding to help you elaborate on how did that really evolve into a career in the fitness industry, and what did that transition look like? You got the Supple Leopard book, you
Hmm.
started doing these stretches, these little brain signals started going off. What happened from there?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I went into the personal training route and started to cut my teeth there and started to see other ways to train and kind of see where my path was going to lead down. And it always was funneling towards this like corrective exercise, mobility side, and things of that nature. But even before then, and even before I got into training, original goal was to go into physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was always kind of like, all right, how can I use my problem solving brain? Like I was at the School of Engineering before I stopped going to college because I like problem solving. I like logical thinking and things like this. And so was eventually the goal was to go to physical therapy after I decided if I liked working with the body, which was why I was in personal training. Like, how do I
Mm-hmm.
like working with people? How do I like working with the body? And if I like both of those things, I'm going to go into physical therapy
Mm-hmm.
with the plan of going through full undergrad, physical therapy school, and so on. Um, like we said before, I ended up having a kid in the middle of that, and that really set my path a little bit slower. So then it wasn't another 4 years or so before I actually started making the steps to go into physical therapy. And by that time, I had diversified a little bit from mobility specific stuff to also being like a conditioning specialist at the Colorado Club, and like
Mm-hmm.
made my way up there to be deeply involved in that.
Yeah,
Did
let's
a lot of
describe
endurance
what
stuff.
you were doing there, just so we can give a little more context. So you were working into becoming a metabolic specialist,
Yeah,
and the opportunities and the tools that we had when we were working for that company were to actually test things like VO2 max, resting metabolic rate,
yeah.
heart rate zones.
Tidal volume, like how much air you can take in, respiratory rate, things like this. And so that club was like top three in the whole lifetime
Network.
network. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was in Colorado Springs. So heavy activity culture there. And,
Mm-hmm.
um,
The place to train if you're
yeah,
trying to train for high level. A lot of the Olympic teams train out of
yeah,
Colorado Springs. You get a ton of endurance athletes
yeah,
training at altitude.
yeah. You're sitting at 6,000 feet out. It's like 665, I think,
Mm-hmm.
feet of altitude, 65,000. And you
100.
just have 6,500. Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, that is the
6,500.
highest place in the world.
Um, so you just have mountains right there, so everything's accessible:
Mm-hmm.
mountain biking, trail running, hiking. So the culture is there. And then we had an amazing metabolic specialist that was there already, and
Mm-hmm.
he had built this program. And when I had come in, we had an amazing metabolic specialist at the Lenexa Club too,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned a lot from him.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out Jonathan.
Jonathan Pfizer, if you're out there, we love you.
Yeah. So I learned a lot from him. And so when I went out there, they ran things a little bit differently, but they were always still like super science focused and heavy on that, but they just incorporated into the business really well. And so when I went out there, the first month I was there, they already knew like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. I built everything into and around that. And so just solidified myself as a good place there, and then started to work up the leadership ladder from there
Mm-hmm.
and tried to move into different clubs and stuff.
You got into PT school or PTA school or something
Yeah,
around that time frame.
right after that. So that's when I actually left the personal training industry and was like, all right, now's the time. I'm gonna go back to school. I'm gonna start that with the original plan of going full 7 years. But then
What year was that?
that was 2019. So this is right
That was
when
about
we,
Leadville.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So Coach Z, shout out
Yeah.
all the name drops here.
Yeah. We, for context, had an opportunity to help a former colleague and all around great dude who's a exceptional endurance athlete. He was doing Leadville, the 100, and we went out to Colorado in August of 2019 to meet him out there. All stayed in a nice little cabin
Yeah,
in Frisco, I believe is where we were at.
yep.
Drove out to Leadville, was a part of his crew. It was a really cool experience.
That was a cool experience.
Yeah, because you and I hadn't connected much for a few years there,
Yeah,
reconnected there, and then didn't probably cross paths again until after the pandemic.
yeah. Because I think you had already left the Lenexa Club by the time I left, maybe
Mm-hmm.
because you had gone into regional stuff
Yeah.
and doing that. But yeah, I mean, even like the leadership awareness course stuff led me to that in Colorado
Yeah,
Springs,
that's another throwback.
being able to like have that position when I was going and interviewing and stuff like that. Ultimately, never got any of those metabolic specialist jobs. But again, it was like, all right, that wasn't really the path that I was looking for
Mm-hmm.
going down, anyways. So 2019, I had already left Lifetime when I saw you out in Leadville. I was out there. I was actually working for a chiropractor who found me through the FRC website at the time.
Yep. Functional range conditioning. If you're not familiar with it, check it out.
Yep. And was going through school there. So actually, my physical therapy journey started at Pikes Peak Community College, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then went to JCCC, and I quickly decided not to go down the full physical therapy route and go through the physical therapist assistant school instead, because just the time frame, I would literally still be in school right now if
Okay.
I would. I mean, I would just be getting through my. Well, I'd be getting close by now, but
Still a big commitment.
yeah, exactly.
Over
And
double the amount of time.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I've been out of school now for almost 3 years. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, and ultimately, I'm really glad I did, because when I got into the industry of physical therapy and got into the clinics and started seeing what it was, what I did was not much different at all than what DPT would have been doing, or a doctor of physical therapy. The only thing I didn't do was the assessments and the
Mm-hmm.
discharges. And so I got their assessments and they had to discharge people, but ultimately I was there working hands on with the people and progressing them and regressing them how I saw fit. And when I was in that, I started to see that, wow, this really isn't like how I want to be treating people. This isn't how I want to run treatment programs. This isn't how I think that things should be. Like, I don't think this is how it should be, especially with insurance and all of these sort of things. So I realized that that's not really what I want to be doing. I don't really want to be doing rehab,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So that kind of, I was only in physical therapy world for like practicing for less than, well, right around 6 months probably.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that's not what you thought it would be or wanted it to be. Explain a little bit more of what that looked like versus maybe your perception or what you think would be ideal.
Yeah. So a lot of the physical therapy world was, and I don't mean to be,
Judgmental, maybe?
yeah, judgmental or to like paint too broad of brushstrokes here,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a generalization, but there was a whole lot of rinse and repeat in the PT world where it's like, oh, somebody comes in with some sort of pain and it's like, okay, well, it's just a weak glute. And so then you get a bunch of banded glute exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And and then you do that for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and then they're like, okay, you can be discharged now. And I think that is more like a placing a band-aid on something and being like, okay, well, maybe you have a pain in your knee, we're going to give you hip exercises to make that strong. But it kind of ignores how you got there in the first place. You didn't just magically get a weak glute. So you weren't really able to address like what caused that or even the deeper implications of having that pain there or having that weak glute, you know? And so I don't know if this goes too far into like my philosophy on this,
Keep going.
but it's like really getting and restoring the joint and the deepest part of the joint to address the nervous system's ability to generate and recruit muscles is how I see that it should be more so than trying to address muscle by muscle and saying, hey, your glutes are weak or they don't turn on and we're just going to give you a lot of glute exercises instead of actually trying to train the hip to be a really good hip and have the joint actually function like a hip should function, because once it's actually functioning like a hip should function, then the glutes will just, they'll come on as you need them to. And if they're still weak at that point, then you can say, okay, well, we just need more glutes at this point, but we have a good hip.
Yep.
And I think that that was ignored in physical therapy, where it's like we don't really look at the true health of a hip unless we're looking at an MRI and saying, well, there's space there. So the MRI and the x ray, they look good because all the structures are still healthy. But if you looked at how they actually moved and expressed their hip joint range of motion or function, you could objectively say that's not a healthy hip because they're not able to control all of the ranges of motion and do everything that a hip should be able to do. And so you see this a lot with elderly populations where their joint health overall has come down so far. So if you just try to ram in glute exercises to a deteriorated hip, yeah, it might help stave something off, but it's not going to really restore anything. And instead, you need to restore the motion of the hip,
Mm-hmm.
that full ball and socket joint, get that to move, and get them to have control over all of that range of motion before really trying to layer in like background strength of like, oh, they just need more glute strength, you know? And then from the athletic population, which really I like and enjoy working with most, is getting the opportunity to look at an athlete, and if they're going knee valgus all the time when they're making cuts or when they're squatting or something, again, in the physical therapy world, a lot of the times it would get oversimplified and say, well, your glute med is weak, or you're, you know, maybe you have tight adductors or something like this. And I think that just doesn't do a real service to the depth and the complexity of the human body, where it's like, I mean, there's a reason that that's tight and there's a reason that that's weak. And it's not necessarily just because they haven't strength trained that or they haven't stretched that. It's probably because they have just not used that joint the way it's supposed to be used, and they
Mm-hmm.
haven't used their hip the way it's supposed to use. It's like playing basketball for 20 hours a week isn't good for your body.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna gradually get worse and worse and worse on your joints if you're
Mm-hmm.
not restoring the joints constantly.
I want to talk about a little bit more about why we feel like people get stuck treating things on the surface level. You made a comment about insurance.
Mm.
This could create for a spicy conversation. But one of the things when I discuss practice methods with some of the people we've connected to in the local area that we trust that are great chiropractors, physical therapists, practitioners, and more of that side that you're talking about, a lot of them are cash based due to the limitations of the
Mm-hmm.
insurance support. So, for example, say somebody comes in and they have a hip issue, they're limited to what they're able to work on and get into based off of it being a hip issue.
Hmm.
And I don't know a ton about this, so
Yeah, this is a good little side tangent because it goes into the complexity of the body in that when you have insurance dealing with this, you have to make all this documentation as a physical therapist that you submit into, the universe, this like platform that then insurance is going to hire people to go and read
mm-hmm,
and like audit your documentation and say, are they doing what they're legally supposed to be doing and whatnot? And the thing about this is that you have to write in your notes the specific exercises that you're doing with these people. So, like a clamshell,
mm-hmm,
an insurance person that's reviewing your documents isn't necessarily a doctor of physical therapy per se. So, they have a list of things that they are looking for in your treatment. And if anything is hard to describe or is not,
not aligned with what was reported.
yeah, or like not a named exercise,
Mm-hmm.
then it gets really, really hard to use that as a treatment option. And I ran into this a lot with like cars or pails and rails or, these sort of
We'll
things.
unpack more about what those
Yeah,
things are
yeah,
in a
yeah.
second. Yeah.
So it's just like it's a different system. It's not what they teach in physical therapy school,
Mm-hmm.
but it's essentially an easier way to say what you're doing versus like if I use the language of the textbooks in physical therapy, it'd be like, I'm doing this neurological, I forget the words now because it's been
Yeah.
so long, but you have to like write out a paragraph to describe what you're doing instead of saying, okay, I did, pails and rails or just pails. And that wasn't something that I could do because nobody else knew what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to spend way too much time or describe things to other therapists, and it just didn't work. So that's the thing with surface level is that you're stuck with named exercises and it's hard to treat individually the person that's in front of you. You have to use the same treatment that you always use with somebody who has a hip issue
Mm-hmm.
or a knee issue. So it's like, and especially when you're treating like 14 people in a day.
Yeah, because that was another thing too that I vividly remember you saying is I see people for such little amount of time that I have a very small amount of influence that I can create physically and
Yeah.
psychologically to help these people make changes. It's, hey, get in, let's power through your exercises, let's do what's on the list and what insurance will cover, and let's get you out of here, and we'll see you back in on
Yeah.
Thursday.
Yeah. 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 Or I'm seeing two people at a time.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, I just have to tell you, I have to give you this very simple named exercise that you can wrap your head around that you can do on your own for 10 minutes while I'm going and working with this other person.
Yeah.
And, like a quad extension or something,
Quick disclaimer, nothing wrong with physical
Yeah.
therapy.
Oh, yeah. And physical therapy is great. I would use it. I will use it. I did my own physical therapy at times,
Same.
and physical therapy at its truest form is fantastic. It's great for rehabbing. The problem, not the problem, but the biggest limitation that I've seen in it is like chronic pain.
Mm-hmm.
People in chronic pain, they come in and it's really hard because they come into physical therapy and there's no like end. In physical therapy, the goal is to get you from your starting point and then get you back to where you were before you got injured and say, okay, you're discharged now. And
Discharge doesn't mean optimal or
exactly,
ideal.
exactly.
I talk about this a lot whenever we're meeting with somebody who comes in with pre-existing injuries. Sometimes I'll even draw it out on a piece of paper where on the far left-hand side you put post-injury, current injury, limitations, chronic pain, post-op, whatever it might be. And then on the far right you put optimal performance and health. And our goal and what we've been able to do here, especially with minds like yours, is create this system where we can meet people wherever they're at on that scale. As long as you are cleared by a doctor to move and exercise, we can go all the way down almost into that physical therapy area. Obviously, we have our scope of practice and our limitations, and we're
Yeah.
going to stay within that
Yeah.
because we're professionals and that's what we do.
100%.
And when we also know that when we meet a limitation that we can't assess, we're going to refer you out to some of the people we do trust in this industry. So that's why I said disclaimer. We have
Yeah.
a great network of professionals that we know locally in Kansas City, and we will send you there. But the goal is to help
Yeah.
put you in an environment so you can collectively address the big picture. Because a lot of times we'll come in and we'll find that what you're feeling may not be the root of where the issue is,
Yeah. 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 So I guess going back to kind of my path,
Mm-hmm.
is when I left physical therapy, I was realizing that I really wanted to be the bridge between physical therapy and optimal performance. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you come out of physical therapy, you're like, okay, great, I'm back to where I was before I got hurt. But that's how you got hurt, is where you were. So I want to be able to take people from that, and even before they get to injured, obviously would be ideal. But take them, restore their body, or get the rest of their body where it needs to be ready for optimal performance. It's like, we have certain clients that'll work a little bit with me and then a little bit with Dalen, for example, where Dalen's like the athletic performance coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
I look at my job as being like, how can I get an athlete to be as physically ready as possible to go and train athletically?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Or even if it was just like skill practice.
Yep.
I want to build somebody the best possible body, like joint by joint, so that when they go and they practice their skill, they have the best joints to be able to use when they're going to practice their skill. Like a baseball pitcher who's
Yeah.
like training their elbow, I want to give them the best damn elbow so that when they go and play and pitch, like they can fine tune, they have the reception, they have the quality,
The
the nervous
connection.
system
Yeah.
connection to control and fine tune that. Because if you never train if you, it's pretty simple. Would you want to go and do skill work with a shitty elbow or like the best damn elbow of all time?
Yeah.
And you can imagine that if you're doing a skill with a bad elbow, it's not going to be great. It's not going to be easy to learn the skill.
Mm-hmm.
If you have,
Because you don't have that neurological control.
yeah,
And I think this is a really good point to start to assess some of these technical terms you've talked about.
mm-hmm.
So it's being able to obtain that range of motion passively, first and foremost, to create the space to be able to work into that range of motion and improve it actively. So,
Mm-hmm.
what might be fun here, and to make sure we don't end up completely talking about just these things, 'cause I had some other things I want to talk to you about, just a quick hitter on some of the terminology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of the terms and the philosophies and the things that you practice are, from what I've understood and what I know about you, come from one, your own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Two, a general athletic strength and conditioning background,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little heavier even in the conditioning side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also using the functional range systems,
Mm-hmm.
which is a whole system that you can look up and look into that has become widely popularized, I think is the right word,
Yeah.
in the corrective space. And then bridging in your physical therapy experience with the functional anatomy approach.
Yeah.
So some of these terms, like passive range of motion, would be defined as what?
So that's the ability for your joint to move into a space. I mean, it's under somebody else's power. Like if I take your arm and reach it overhead, you're not doing anything. It's just how much can your joint move.
So basically, how far can you stretch it?
Yeah, it's basically like flexibility.
Great.
How flexible are you is passive range of motion.
Yep. And then active range of motion being,
How well you can take it there.
which I would define as mobility, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think there's so many, even at that in the most minute level, there's so many misunderstandings.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a baseball player. You don't have to be a basketball player.
Yeah.
You can be someone who just wants to operate in life better. You can want to play recreational sports. You can want to go on a bike ride. You can want to not be in pain. And these things
Yeah, be
apply
able to
for
pick
you.
up your kids, be able to go pick up any hobby that you want.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's active range of motion, there's passive range of motion. Can you break down cars in a really simple and succinct way?
Yeah, cars is, well, it's defined as controlled articular rotations. So how well can you control rotationally the articulations of your body? And articulation is where two bones connect, so a joint.
Okay.
And in a car, your goal is to express as much range of motion in that particular joint as you can without moving any other part of your body.
Yep.
And
And that's where stability comes into play.
yeah, the thing with cars is that it's so much about the nervous system.
Yep.
And this is where it's hard for people to wrap their head around because they think of an exercise and they think, what muscles is this working?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is this doing for me? And with cars, and the goal is really to maintain or, if needed, restore the health of a joint.
Mm-hmm.
The health of a joint is defined by range of motion plus strength.
Yep.
So you have to have a full range of motion and you have to be able to control it.
Yep.
So cars is your tool to do that with any joint of the body on a regular basis so that you don't lose it. You use it or you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Cars is your tool to not lose it.
Yep.
And then we can use it in other ways to train. to train the joint for resilience, but we don't really use it to expand range of motion.
And
And
that's where pails and rails come in.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
pails, rails, short explanation on those.
Yeah, yeah. Take a joint to a stretch, basically like you're stretching something. Then you want to squeeze that stretched muscle, and then you want to squeeze the opposite side of the joint to go into a further range of motion. So I don't know if I did how well I did
Yeah.
with that simplifying it, but the goal is to get more range of motion. So you hear people talk about being stiff.
Yep.
So they do like a forward fold. A pails and rails would be like, oh, I feel a stretch in my hamstring, so I'm going to squeeze that. This is commonly, used in
PNF stretching.
PNF stretching. Yeah,
Yep.
squeeze and then relax. The only difference is that instead of just relaxing, you're going to squeeze the opposite side of the joint and try to pull yourself deeper into that range of motion actively using your own muscles and your own strength.
Yep.
So that's pails and rails, and that's how you incorporate that. And this is another, I don't know, one of the things that's misconceived about mobility and stretching and range of motion is that if I start stretching for 15 minutes every night, I'm going to get healthier joints and I'm going to start to have flexibility.
And you're not wrong there. You're going to take pressure off of joints. You're going to improve flexibility. But we talked about this earlier, in that passive range of motion is only a percentage of the equation.
Yes.
If you can get into a position, that's one thing. I think this is where a lot of people who do a lot of yoga struggle, is they end up hypermobile because all they do is stretch. And this is not labeling all forms of yoga, so don't attack me there, yogis.
Well, the same with dancers, they're so used to like throwing their leg up. So they sit in these passive stretches so they can hit these moves, but then they don't have the control over it. And in order to really make a change in range of motion, you do have to spend a lot of time. And that's what I was kind of getting at with the misconception of how to actually improve range of motion. It takes time. Like, it shows in research that 2 minutes is a minimum amount of time to get new range of motion in your stretch. And then that's how you get
a lot of people at the end of a
motion.
workout, they're like, all right, I'm going to put my arm behind my head here.
Yeah.
15 seconds. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go to the other side.
I mean,
15.
I'm guilty of that too.
Well, I think we all are.
Yeah, because it feels good. And at the end of the day, you're getting some range of motion, some blood flow. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
And the best way to simplify making these things easier to do is just to start somewhere. So even if you're doing it just to feel good, I think that's step one.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is getting to layers and layers and layers, which is where the value of working with somebody who is specialized like you are, is to go to the next level and to create that opportunity to work past the things that just feel good, or maybe the things that you can't quite figure out.
Yeah.
And look at a big picture too,
Yeah, 100%.
Let's do a hard pivot here to some of your experiences as a dad and how that's changed your approach to and your thoughts around health and performance. I know when you're younger, before you have kids, a lot of your life, all of your life, is surrounded around what you want to do and what's important for you, and playing sports and being social. And then all of a sudden your world changes and you have another human you're responsible for. How did that shift and change your approach to or your thoughts around health and performance?
Yeah. I don't really feel like I paid a whole lot of attention to my overall health before I had a child. And what I mean by that is, like, kind of do whatever I want. I was still pretty young, like 23, 24, and was kind of doing whatever I wanted in life. And I had started to get on the path that I needed to be on, but it was still not where it needed to be physically. Like things like alcohol and things like that was just something I did whenever I wanted. And there wasn't, eating out, these sort of things. It wasn't very regular, regimented. And a lot of times when I was first a young personal trainer, I felt like a hypocrite a lot of times, especially when I first got started as a nutrition coach. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing a lot of this either, And when I had my son, that's when I started taking like health and wellness more seriously. I realized that it wasn't just me. I had to take care of somebody else. And so I started cooking at home almost exclusively, grocery shopping all the time, not eating out, not drinking, these sort of things. And it just, I think the biggest thing was responsibility, the ability to, take care of somebody else, or the need to do that.
Yeah, well, you have to show up differently when it's not just you.
Yeah.
Which
Exactly.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's kind of that's the biggest thing.
So we've gone through a lot, man. We've covered everything from how you got into the industry to what got you into more mobility, some of your endurance background. I know another thing we haven't talked a whole lot about is you do some cyclocross. I think that's a really cool, like,
Yeah, yeah.
side fitness hobby. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that entails? I know
Hmm.
it's mountain biking, but that's about as far as I could explain it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you probably make some of the mountain bikers here cringe by saying that, or the cyclocrossers. I don't know, because it is its own genre, and
And that's how
it's
much I
funny.
don't know
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. It's
If I
funny.
see you on a bike on a trail, then
Oh God.
you're a biker.
Here's the
You're an
thing.
off-road biker to me. That's about as far
This
as I understand.
this analogy has just kind of come to me. Maybe it's because we had this conversation with Jackie right before this,
Hmm.
um, about LeBron and Jordan, and
Of course. Here's
and
where we end up.
objectively, people have their own opinions, but like in cycling, like you have the roadies and the mountain bikers,
Hmm.
and it's like it's way too heated. Like the roadies will be like, "Yeah, why would I ever be off road?" And the mountain bikers are like, "Why would I ever be on the road?" You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And then cyclocross is kind of this in the middle section.
Yep.
And just to give some of the people like actual context on what cyclocross is you have mountain biking. Those are like the big knobby tires, suspension on the front and the back. And then road bike is super skinny tires, super fast, super light, this sort of thing. Drop handlebars on the road bike, flat handlebars on the mountain bike. Cyclocross, the bike itself is like a hybrid between both of those,
Hmm.
which I guess in some ways is fitting to me being, a field sport athlete, an endurance athlete. I'm kind of a hybrid of a lot of things.
Hmm.
So maybe that's why I like it. But the actual bike has skinny but knobby tires,
Hmm.
more like a road bike frame, really light and rigid, no shocks, no like suspension, and it's got drop handlebars, but
Okay.
it's got like wider knobby tires, not as wide as a mountain bike. And the race itself is shorter. It's like, you know, depending on the level, 30 minutes to an hour.
Hmm.
Like the highest level is usually like a 55-minute race or something like that. And I just started getting into this a couple of years ago working at the bike shop. When I was in school, I worked at a bike shop and definitely got into cycling a lot more at that time. Would ride my
Especially being
bike to
in
work.
Colorado too. Obviously, you mentioned a lot more opportunities out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I got into mountain biking when I was out there. I
Hmm.
started like renting a mountain bike at a shop that was real close, and I could literally just ride it back to a trail and ride mountain bikes. So that's where I started there. And when I came back to Kansas City is when I got into the bike shop. So yeah, I have the opportunity to get mountain biking, road biking. I did all of it, and then cyclocross is this race that fits my attributes a little bit more. Where it's like, all right, you're going to be riding around this circuit. It's like if you can think of cross country running,
Hmm.
it's on a course like that where it's a circuit, and you're going to go maybe on some road, but most of the time you're on grass or dirt. You might have some obstacles that you literally have to get off your bike, carry your bike over, and then get back on your bike and then go and cycle again. Lots of ups and downs, tight turns,
Yeah.
things like that. And you cycle through that or circuit through that. And so that's cyclocross. And I think that it's a avenue that requires skill and like an engine, like endurance, but it's not 100% endurance. Like I just wouldn't be able to ever compete in anything like that because I don't have the base of being an elite endurance athlete.
Yeah.
But I have good skill with like mountain biking, and so I can use some of that skill to help me with cyclocross. And
Hmm.
ultimately, it's about training for it. And I just started doing that a couple of years ago. I've only done a handful of races, but something that I want to strive to do to give me something to train for, and also it's something that's fun. And
I think it's important to have something that you're working towards.
yeah,
You talk
training
about how,
for.
yeah, about how your training and your approach to health and performance has changed so much over the course of your time as a father and your
Yeah.
evolution as a professional. And for those that don't know why you would know, I'm not sure, but Bryan doesn't have an ACL in his left knee.
Well, to be fair to everybody else, I also didn't know this
Yeah,
for a long time, like almost 10 or 11 years of my life. I didn't actually know that it was torn.
yeah,
I could have had hints and probably should have known, but I chose, and I'm hard headed. And so, like, I chose to think, like, maybe it's still there.
yeah.
It's just a little stretched or something.
I say that because if you watch Bryan move, you would have absolutely no idea. And I think it's a testament to you and how much you've learned how to apply the things you've picked up over the years
Yeah.
professionally and the work you've done to make sure that wasn't a barrier for you.
Hmm.
That's a higher form mindset thing, right?
Yeah.
It's I don't want to put this physical limitation on my ability to go out and do what I love to do and what I want to do. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, some injuries require more intervention than others, but like I said, I think it's really a strong testament to the skills and the practice that you've picked up over the years to be able to move and train and exercise and even compete the way that you do now.
Hmm.
Because from the outside looking in, I don't think anyone have any idea that you've been dealing with that, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. I know it's funny because my friends used to always joke with me. We'd be out playing disc golf because that's basically what I did when the third time I basically tore my ACL 3 summers in a row. And after the third time, I was like, all right, I'm not playing sports for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I started playing disc golf because it was like, all right, this is still fun, it's skillful, and it's still frisbee.
Yeah.
But then I would play with my friends, and they'd always be like, I'd trip or something, and they'd be like, don't tear your ACL. And turns out the joke's on them because it was always torn.
Yeah. Too bad. It's
Yeah,
already gone.
yeah. But you mentioned something there that I'll pick up on because you have a choice, and all of the members that we work with, or clients that we work with, and all the people that you interact with, like everybody has a choice on how they want to face life and what mindset they want to use
Mm-hmm.
to face life. And far too often, people get stuck into this victim mindset where everything's against them and they are reacting to all these circumstances. And so I also think that's something from being a dad that changed my life a lot was not being a victim to my circumstances. I could have been pouty or been like, oh man, this sucks. I didn't plan for this kid type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but instead, I just chose to run into it and embrace it and to make the most of it and enjoy these sort of things that you end up getting into. And that sort of choice, I think, is something that I was forced to learn and I did learn that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah. And I've seen you develop that even more professionally too,
Yeah.
getting into a role where you're a leader here for us and
Hmm.
you have started to get more comfortable with having hard conversations and being
Yeah.
able to challenge people. And one of the things that you just mentioned was exactly what we've talked about is running towards the things you
Hmm.
resist and the things that you want to resist and getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, as cliche as it may sound, being able to see something that you don't want to do and rather than freezing and going to that fight or flight and deciding whether or not you want to move forward or not, you don't think twice, you just go for it. And when you feel so much better when you're done. And I think that's something you've done a tremendous job of. Obviously, you've done that personally. You share your experience there, but it's been cool to see your evolution in the last 2.5 years of working together again
Yeah.
because it's gone from how do I resettle back into creating the opportunities that I want and being able to truly lead people through this process, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think has been your favorite part about being in the role that you're in now in regards to being able to help people better their health or improve their own skills, whether that's even a coach or it's clients you're working with? What do you feel like you dig most about the position that you're in life and professionally right now?
Yeah. The role I'm in from like the leadership role or the admin side of things, that's been something that has been rewarding just in the sense of learning something new or facing something that I always thought that I wasn't ever going to get good at. And so it's given me an opportunity to practice it and learn how to face these conversations and learn how to face these circumstances or these scenarios and lean into them head on. From a like training standpoint, it's been cool. I've had a big influx in getting really specific mobility specific clients that have come in, and I think I've realized that one of the things that I really like about coaching these people is that they all have these complex problems and it's hard to find one little solution. And so when you're able to break down how it starts off pretty simple and gradually get you up to where you need to go, and maybe even just starting simply, you're going to start to see improvements,
Mm-hmm.
has been cool because going back to the physical therapy conversation, it never really felt like I had the best tools to bring somebody up from like square one or address or have a good framework for where to start
Mm-hmm.
and how to progress them through it. And that's something that I did learn from the functional range systems and have a really good strategy to deal with a really complex system.
Yeah. What
But
about helping someone get started if they feel like this is all overwhelming? Because what you do is pretty high level. What you're able to help people with is pretty advanced. And if
Hmm.
I'm someone listening to this and I've got aches or pains or things that I'm struggling with, and maybe I'm a little bit intimidated or overwhelmed about the idea of improving the way that I move, what base level advice could you give someone to help them start moving better today? Something simple that they could start applying immediately.
Yeah. With my personal clients, especially if they're overwhelmed or they don't know where to start, like the very first starting point is something like cars because, hey, you just need to start trying to move your body. You just need to develop some sort of mobility practice
Mm-hmm.
of moving your body around. And whether or not that's through FRC practices like I teach, or even in some cases like yoga flows or Pilates, these are all good options to get the body moving.
Yep.
And so you just have to start to try to move your body as much as you can. And I think that's the best advice I can give to people. The hard part is, how do I do that? And
You have a YouTube video and a series of YouTube videos.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
quick
yeah.
plug on that. If you guys go to the Avexia Health and Performance YouTube channel, the same place where we post this podcast, there is a mobility series there that has a daily cars routine.
Yes.
It has specific joint by joint approaches for
Hmm.
ways to be able to uh, create soft tissue releases, to do active loaded stretches, to work on mobilizing and improving strength in certain joints and limitations. So that's definitely something we've been working on, and you've done a great job of leading the charge on to get some content out there. So if you haven't checked that stuff out, that's a good place to start. But where
Yeah.
else can people find you?
I'm on Instagram at BDAirs and here and there getting stuff out on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny about the YouTube channel because I didn't, for a long time, I didn't realize that was all there.
Yeah.
And I was like, once I found that out, I started sending it out to people,
Yeah.
family, and things of that nature, and realized that everybody has access to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really cool.
Yeah.
So that is
Well,
a
look
great
for
place to
more of
start.
that. Yeah, a really good place to start.
Hmm.
Anything else you want to share with everybody else before we wrap things up?
No, no.
Dude, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I
That goes
appreciate you coming
fast.
on board. And I know, man, we could sit and talk for 6 hours. I really meant that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
thanks for coming on. I'm sure that this won't be the last time. Maybe next time we'll get into some really deep topics on something mobility focused. But
Or maybe something completely random.
yeah, or maybe we'll just go off the record on some random shit. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
either way, thanks again, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate
Appreciate you
you.
guys for checking this out today. We'll catch you next time on the Higher Form Podcast. Thanks. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, you can follow us on social media and tune in anywhere you listen to podcasts.